So I had something interesting and kind of traumatic happen today at a bed and breakfast Mark and I were staying at regarding having celiac disease and food issues. I wrote to the place we were staying well ahead of time and said, I have celiac disease. I have to have because they were going to offer us a breakfast. It's like, and I can't have cross contamination with gluten, and will you be able to accommodate me? And the person wrote back that we'll have gluten-free pancakes. We'll have a great spread with some breakfast meats and eggs. And I said, that sounded great. I'm like, I just want to double check on, the cross-contamination just to be sure you understand, not shared utensils and everything. And then I also said, and I have a dairy allergy, which I forgot to mention in my first message. So the person wrote back, yep, we're at your service. So I felt pretty confident. I thought I felt confident going in and being like, all right, I'm going to be fine with this. And then once we get to the bed and breakfast, I realized this is somebody's home, and I haven't ever stayed in a bed and breakfast, and didn't really understand that it really kind of wasn't as much of a commercial operation. And the couple that owned it was, they were older. I would put them in possibly around their 80s. I start to get a little nervous about the food. And when we sat down for breakfast, I asked if the milk sitting on the table for the tea was almond milk or regular milk. And the gentleman hosting us was like, oh, nope. And he went and got me a little cup of almond milk for my tea. So I began to worry that perhaps some of the issues had not been thought of or had been forgotten. There was butter on the table, but that was fine. That's for my husband. So the meal gets placed in front of us, and it's these beautiful looking gluten-free blueberry pancakes and eggs and some chicken apple sausage, and it looks wonderful. And we were eating and everything seemed fine, and I was a little nervous, but we were enjoying the food. And the gentleman came back out and said, is everything not, he brought out the box for the gluten-free pancake mix, and he's like, here's the pancake mix just to be sure. So maybe he was reading tension between us. He couldn't hear us conversation. Maybe he felt like we were upset. So he brings the box over and he walks away again into the kitchen. I look at the box and I look at the ingredients, and there's milk in it. And it was towards the end of the ingredients, it was buttermilk. And I was like, shoot, I haven't had dairy in 3 years. I do eat goat dairy, but not cow. And I did have a pill that I take if I'm out. It's supposed to help with casein, enzymes to help with casein digestion and with gluten. So I always take it when I'm out just in case, because I never know. So I'm like, maybe I'll be fine. But, he came back out and seemed a little upset. He's like, is everything not how you wanted it to be? And was sort of this tone. And I was like, well, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity to say something. And I was like, well, there is milk in the pancake mix. And he kind of lost it on me and grabbed the box and said, it's gluten-free, there's no milk in this. And I said, no, I know it's gluten-free. I'm like, but there's milk in the ingredients. He's like, no, I used almond milk like you asked. And I said, but it's in the ingredients. And he storms away, and Mark and I are sitting at the table, and it's literally just him in the kitchen and us at the table. And I don't know what to do. And Mark said, well, I'll eat your pancakes. Why don't you take my eggs? And so we were trying to sort of figure it out, but I was so uncomfortable. And the gentleman was kind of huffing and puffing in the kitchen. And he comes back out to me and he says, you are the most difficult person I've ever had to serve in here. This is too difficult. This is gluten-free. I found it at the store. And so I'm standing up at this point, and he's walked into the kitchen, and I was like, no, sir, I just want to show you on the ingredients list that it says milk. And he just kind of continued to make me feel pretty terrible and tell me this is so difficult to feed, and how could anyone expect this? And I said, well, sir, I did write to you in advance to make sure that you'd be able to accommodate me. And at this point, I'm basically crying. We're having this very uncomfortable confrontation in his kitchen. And I'm crying, and he's like, I didn't know. And he's kind of slamming pots and pans around. And I worked so hard to cook for you and this. And I'm so uncomfortable. And then he muttered something under his breath. And I said, excuse me? And he didn't say anything. So I walked back to the table and I'm like, Mark, I'm so upset. Like I have to go upstairs. Like I was so beside myself. And Mark kind of suggested I stay. And so I'm sitting there, and then he came back out and challenged me again. He's like, yeah, it's just, and I was like, I'm not upset, sir. I'm not upset. I just want to tell you that this was it. I didn't know I had to read ingredients. I don't have to be a scientist, whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just showing you this. I'm like, I'm not upset. He's like, well, that makes one of us or something. And then we're both bothered by this. And again, I walked back to the table, and then he came over eventually and was like, I just didn't know what to do. And he seemed like he was starting to become a little bit contrite, and kind of realizing maybe he had a bit of a tantrum. And, I felt good about standing my ground and saying, I definitely warned you and said what my issues were, and didn't back down on that, which was really hard for me. I wanted to just run away and say, this is my fault. I shouldn't have expected this. But you are serving the public, and I'm going to take this chance to educate you. I'm not going to say educate because that's condescending, but I was like, I'm going to take this opportunity to show you that this is in this. And he's like, I thought it was just flour. To me, it's flour. You are so difficult. how is your life? Your life must be so difficult. And of course I'm crying, and I'm like, my life is difficult. I'm like, this is why I have to check on things all the time. And I always have to call, and I always have to, make sure it's going to be safe. And so eventually at this point now it's been about 5-10 minutes, and it's dissipating. And he's like, I just don't understand. No one's ever been here that's as difficult as you. And what's it like? And so then he kind of started asking me questions about it. And I was like, really, you did fine with the gluten-free. I'm like, it was just the milk thing, which I'm like, to be honest, like I informed you later. It wasn't the first thing I told you, so I can understand maybe you forgot, or it wasn't as, noted. So, I apologize for that. And, he's like, and so he really wanted to, he had never heard of celiac. He knew of gluten intolerance, and he said he's been trying to, feed people that come to his BnB. He's like, I've got vegan diet lists. I've got hypoglycemic lists, but I've never heard of anything like this. So it was interesting in the fact that he actually did listen when I was telling him about what it means to be celiac. And Mark was saying, it's really difficult for us to travel, and we don't do it as much anymore. And so, he felt so bad for me. He felt so bad for me. And, eventually he said, if my food made you sick, I'll give you a refund. And we were like, absolutely not. Like, this was great. But, and I kept trying to be like, I'm not upset. I was just trying to sort of inform you. And I think he was embarrassed, and he felt bad, and he also didn't want to get me sick. And, but he definitely had a tantrum, and it was odd trying to be, a woman my age, trying to handle this with a person much older than I was, and, who didn't know anything about the subject. And it was a good teaching moment, but my phone just died, so I'm continuing on my husband's phone. So, I said, I feel fine. Thankfully, that pill I took must have worked for the, the casein in the milk. And whatever he did to ensure no cross contact, he did say he used another pan. So that worked. So, and I was like, I'm fine. Like I would know by now. I would know within 20 minutes whether the milk or the gluten had affected me. So I kept just wanting to reassure him, I'm okay. And, so, we got to the point where we were on fine terms, and he just kept expressing how bad he felt for me, and that this was the situation, and he was sorry. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't really apologize, but, he said he just was expressing a lot of, asking what the science is about celiac, and is there a cure? Like, not yet. So we went back upstairs, to finish packing up our stuff. And when we left, both Mark and I shook his hand, and his wife was there at this point too. She hadn't been there during this whole thing. And, he's like, I just really want to, I want to make sure you guys it's okay. And she feels okay. And I was like, I'm fine. I'm like, and he's like, I'm sorry. I was the host. I didn't host well. And I'm like, this place was great. I'm like, the bed was super comfortable. The shower was epic. It's just, and I'm fine. So I just, I just want you to know that. And we're not going to ask for a refund or anything. So, it all ended well. And as soon as I checked my email when I got home, he had messaged me through the hotels.com service and expressed again that he was sorry that he hadn't been able to accommodate me, and that he thought he could, and he realized he couldn't, and looked up some, science about where gene technology was something, as my hope, to give me hope to help my celiac. So that was really nice, and I wrote him back, and we had a little exchange, and, I just thanked him for trying, and, I expressed how I hadn't really stayed at a BnB before, and I didn't understand it wasn't really commercial, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think this was a big learning experience for me. And the other thing it made me sort of realize, and I didn't say this to him, is I have been very, very strict since being diagnosed with, basically making sure I don't use pans that other people have used that use gluten, and if they've been washed. I'm hyper vigilant. And I've read things from dietitians that say as long as pans are clean, they're okay. As long as an oven doesn't have something with gluten in it next to the non-gluten item, and you're not using the convection oven, that's fine too. I just haven't felt comfortable. My mom cleans the oven every time she cooks for me. And, I usually bring my own pans to places. But my point with this is maybe I don't have to be so overboard. I don't know. I've only been diagnosed for 3 years. I'm not sure how little can damage my gut. I guess it's it's 20 parts per million, or that's what it has to be labeled to be gluten-free, but I don't know where the damage stops. Is it literally a microgram will damage someone and you just don't know it because you don't feel it, or does it take a little bit more gluten to actually do some damage? So I've just been so careful, and maybe I can loosen up a little bit, because I felt okay. It's not sure. It's a tough thing to think about, because it starts feeling almost obsessive, thinking about making sure my food hasn't touched anything that is gluten and just isn't contaminated. And it's a hard feeling to get past. My cat obviously agrees with me. But yeah, I just wanted to share that story, and yeah, it just felt like a very eye-opening moment for me, for him, and yeah, I guess I'm glad it happened. Hard things, you always learn from hard things, right? So hopefully it'll have some good outcomes for both me and him. All right. Thanks for listening.